Well, welcome to my study here in Leyland in England. My name's Justin Mote, and I'm going to be the main speaker at the Crossword Youth Camp in a month's time. I'm really looking forward to being with you, not just because we'll be leaving freezing England, where there's frost on the ground this morning, to come to the glorious sunshine of where you are, but also because I'm thrilled at the possibility of teaching the book of Romans to all the young people who are going to be there. As we celebrate in this last week or so the 500th anniversary of the Reformation in Europe, as Martin Luther came to understand that he was saved through grace, by faith, through Christ, he came to understand that principally as he read the book of Romans. John Wesley read merely the introduction to Luther's commentary on the book of Romans and was converted through that. So the book of Romans has done a great deal in the history of the Christian church in Europe and therefore right around the world. And we are thrilled to have it in front of us, and I'm really looking forward to explaining it and encouraging you to live out its consequences. Well, what can you do before you come to Crossword Camp? Can I suggest a couple of things that you could do? The first thing, and the most important thing, is to read the book. It's 16 chapters. It won't take you that long to read, so you might have time to read it 2 or 3 times. As you read it, you may well discover that there's an envelope to the book. That is, it begins in chapter 1, verses 1 to 17, and then ends in chapter 15, verse 14, to the end of chapter 16. It is bordered, it's enveloped by Paul's greetings, Paul's travel plans, and a summary of the gospel that he's going to preach in the book. I think there's a number of things that you could helpfully do by way of introduction as you read that envelope. Let me say it again, the envelope, chapter 1, verses 1 through to 17, and then chapter 15 and verses 14 to the end of the book. You can see that that's the envelope at the end, because in chapter 15, verse 14, he starts to say that he has written, he has reminded them of some things quite boldly. Why not ask these questions as you read just the envelope? Why not read the envelope and ask, who is writing? And it's not as straightforward as just saying Paul. Second, ask, who's he writing to? He's obviously writing to the Romans, but what information can you glean from that envelope? What information can you glean about the Romans? What do you know about them? That'll be helpful for when we read the book itself. Third, you might be able to work out when Paul is writing. That is, you can work out in the book things that have already taken place for both Paul and the church in Rome, and you can work out what Paul in the future wants to do. And if you're very clever, you can read it alongside the book of Acts and work out, where are we in the story of Acts when Paul actually wrote the book of Romans? All the clues are there in the envelope. And then fourthly and lastly, as you read the envelope, try and work out why Paul is writing. Now, if you buy any of the really big commentaries on Romans, and I'm not suggesting you should fork out your Christmas money on that, but if you read Doug Moo, he'll give you probably 14 different reasons why people have thought that Romans was written, or John Stott in his Bible Speaks Today commentary, you'll read his suggestions. Why not read what Paul in the envelope says is the reason for him writing? Now, it'll take us a bit of time at the convention to unpick chapter 15 and verses 14 through to 17, but that's where Paul tells us why he's written. And when you know why Paul has written, it will help you work out how all the individual bits of the book fit into the whole. So why not read the envelope? But then I want to encourage you to read the body of the letter itself, that runs from chapter 1 verse 18 through to chapter 15 and verse 13. Now, pretty well everyone agrees that falls into 4 sections. Chapter 1 verse 18 through to chapter 3 and verse 20 is the first section. And chapter 3 verse 21 begins with a very strong "but now," and seems to be starting a new section in the book. So the second section runs from chapter 3 verse 21 through to the end of chapter 8. Though as you read it, you'll probably work out that chapter 3 verse 21 to 26 is what some scholars call the engine room of the book of Romans. It's really the heartbeat of what the whole book is about, because every section that runs from there, whether it's chapter 3 verse 27 or chapter 5 verse 1 or chapter 5 verse 9 or chapter 5 verse 12 or chapter 6 verse 1 or chapter 6 verse 15 or chapter 7 verse 7 or chapter 7 verse 13 or chapter 8 verse 31, all of the sections that run from after chapter 3 verse 21 to 26, the engine room, all begin with the word therefore or what then. Now what that means is that every section that comes after that engine room is working out either the right or the wrong implications of what Paul has said. So see if you can come up with a summary of chapter 3 verse 21 to chapter 8 verse 39. Now, there's no doubt that chapter 9 to 11 is a distinct section. Some people think that it's Paul going off at a tangent. I don't think that at all. But it is worth working out what Paul is saying in chapters 9 to 11. The key verse, if you want the clue, is chapter 9 verse 6, where Paul says God's word has not failed. And the two questions to ask is, why does Paul need to prove that God's word has not failed? And how has God's word not failed to Israel? Well, chapter 12 begins with a therefore, and it's working out the implications of chapters 1 to 11. And chapters 12, verse 1 through to chapter 15 and verse 16 will helpfully give the implications or the applications or the so what or the what do I do with the information you've told me. And we'll want to spend some time looking at that. We don't want to be merely hearers of God's word. We want to be doers of it too. And Paul has told us something of the what we should do. So why don't we try and work out what we should do? So in summary, look at the envelope and work out those questions I've given you. And then look at the body of the letter and those 4 sections that I've given you. And why not, for each of those 4 sections, see if you could write a 10-word summary of each of those 4 sections that will then give you the melodic line or the flow of how the argument of the book works. I'd be thrilled if you did that. Indeed, here's a challenge. For the person who comes up with the best 40-word summary of the whole of the book of Romans, I will bring for you a commentary on Romans, and you can have it for free as a gift to say well done. So there's a challenge. 4 sections. Each section you've got 10 words. Each section, when we read the 10 words together, gives us 40 words, and the best, therefore, summary of the whole of the book of Romans, well, you get a book. How about that? Well, what might help you as you come to read the book, and what might help you by way of commentary? I've got 3 suggestions. I'm assuming that very few of you are going to go and buy the really big commentaries on Romans. Nearly everybody has written on Romans at some point. Douglas Moo, who I've mentioned, he's the chairman of the NIV Translation Committee and teaches in the United States. He's a terrifically godly Christian man and has written brilliantly on Romans, but the book is enormous and will cost you your grandmother. to get it. So I'm suggesting, unless you've got a lot around, you won't get that. What you might be able to get is John Stott's Bible Speaks Today series. And his commentary on Romans, I don't agree with everything he says in it, but it's a really, really good read. John Stott, dead now in glory, but he writes compellingly and gets under the skin of Romans and helpfully communicates its big message. If reading a long commentary, and John Stott's is still quite a long book, if that's not your kind of thing, why not go for something much shorter? Why not get hold of David Cook's undated devotions from 10 of those? 10ofthose.com. In England it costs about £3 or £4. It's nothing really. I know that might be 60-70 rand for you guys, but read through his comments and you'll find that that's really helpful, especially in understanding the doctrines that are going on in the book of Romans. But maybe you're not a reader, maybe you're a listener, and the best I know of listening is to go to the proctrust.org.uk. That's the website of the Proclamation Trust. So Google Proclamation Trust and it will come up with proctrust.org.uk. And under the resources section, go to speaker and go to Dick Lucas, who for many years was the rector of St Helens Bishopsgate and the founder of the Proclamation Trust, and his autumn lectures from the early 1990s, where he goes through in 16 one-hour lectures the whole of the book of Romans, is absolutely terrific. Well, if you've been able to watch this, thanks. I'm sorry it's only an iPad video. I'm sorry that my quality of recording is not that great. I'm not a great technophile. You can see some books of mine in the corner. You can see the door and all of that kind of thing. Ignore that. I hope it's a little help to you in preparing for Crossword 2017. I'm so looking forward to being with you. I have my notebook open at the moment with Romans open in front of me, and I'm looking forward to trying to get to grips with the book with you. I've got 9 sessions, and I'm going to try and do it so that we have 9 words at the end of our studies that will summarise the whole of Romans in just 9 words. So keep the sunshine out. It's freezing cold here. I'm looking forward to the warmth of the Western Cape, and I'll see you in December. May God bless you. Bye-bye.